Hey guys, Nike here. I wanted to do a quick video. You guys know that Zwift has been blowing up in popularity lately, and when that has happened, we've seen an influx of tons of new riders, the races and stuff, and the events are super packed. And of course, you see people that are not experienced on the platform now complaining that everyone is a cheater. So let's talk a little bit about that. The fact of the matter is that what you see is that you have people who, in their tiny small towns, and I say that as someone who also lives in a small town, that they are the big dog in their small town because they have, I don't know, maybe a 280 watt FTP. They have a lot of the local KOMs. They are the strong guy on the local group ride. And they're fit. I mean, 280 FTP is definitely a very fit person. That is definitely not a Joe public off the street. However, they come on Zwift and they find out that there's guys who are pushing 350 or more, and not just one. You join a big race like we have, like the Hout Route Watopia Stage 3, where there were, I don't know, 4,000 people in it. Yeah, you're going to find that there's hundreds, well, not hundreds, but there's going to be dozens of people that have an FTP that dwarfs your 280. And in your head, you're like, well, dude, I'm one of the fastest guys I know. So how come when I come on Zwift, I'm average? Or I'm getting like my doors blown off me by these guys who are just insanely fast. And the thing is that you're not comparing so you instantly assume that everyone's cheating. What you're missing, what this person is missing, is that Zwift is a much bigger pool. You, in your local group ride where you're the strong guy with your 280 watt FTP, you are a medium-sized fish in a small pool. But what that has done to your head is made you think that you're a big fish in maybe a medium-sized pool or even a big pool. You might not have a very good gauge of what your own ability is, especially if you don't do categorized racing outside. If you are just the local group ride guy, but you're not also doing crits and road races, licensed crits, licensed road races against people that are also racers, you probably have an inflated sense of your own power. And I say that with perfect humility for myself, knowing that I am very average. So again, Zwift is a gigantic pool. When we're talking about a race like the one that I have up on the screen, we're talking about thousands of riders. Zwift is casting a large net. It's a big pool. Within that, it's not just all the cyclists in the world are on Zwift. No. Only hardcore cyclists for them, or I should put it this way. Zwift is slanted more towards hardcore cyclists. Yes, there's plenty of casual weekend warrior or even just like wine moms who are looking to burn a few calories on Zwift. Totally understood. But the population on Zwift is skewed towards the more competitive cyclist relative to the general overall cycling population of the world. So what that means is if you have 100 racers in a Zwift race and 100 riders at some local fondo outside, the Zwift race will have faster riders on average because it's drawing from a bigger pool of more hardcore cyclists. So it's not surprising that people on Zwift are so fast. And yes, of course, some people are cheating. Some people have bad equipment. Some people are accidentally cheating. They just have bad, poorly calibrated equipment, where they don't care about anything. They have dumb trainers. They're using ZP. So nothing matter. Like none of their stuff. It doesn't matter to them. But then of course there's a tiny amount of people who are malicious and want to cheat, and those are psychopaths and sociopaths. Like you can't account for them. I mean, there's just any time that you have tens of thousands of people somewhere. Some percentage of them will be sociopaths. You just gotta, like, that's just life. So with that out of the way, what I wanted to say again, most people on Zwift aren't cheating, especially, and it can bruise your ego to think that you're the big dog in your small town, and then you come on Zwift and you get your doors blown off. It can be an ego bruise, and you just assume that everyone's cheating. But I assure you, they're not. There are some people that are cheating again, but most are not. So with that said, there are people that are obviously cheating on Zwift, and I want to talk a little bit about that and how to actually find them. And a little bit of it has to do with using Zwift Power and Strava. And this is all very common sense. This is not a 200 IQ detective thing. This is very surface level. But what you find is that the most egregious cheats don't really take too many pains to cover their tracks. And one thing I do want to say is I'm not trying to pick on the person that I'm making an example of in particular. I think that's kind of bullying, and I don't really want to do that. So I'm going to make pretty good attempt here to hide their identity. But what I will say is that this person that I'm going to point out has incredibly poorly calibrated equipment, and I think I'll be able to prove that that's the case. And as a result of that, they have an insanely inflated, and they don't seem to realize it, or they don't want to consciously admit it, but that they know their equipment's wrong. But as a result, they have an insanely inflated sense of their cycling ability, and even that isn't enough to like provoke me to make a video like this. But what I took objection to was the fact that this person races and streams on Twitch, and does incredibly well in the races, like far better than we're not even talking, it's light years better than what they're actually capable of. And even and that bothers me. I'll be honest, it does bother me that, like, if you have poorly calibrated equipment and you just want to ride around on Zwift and just like work out, dude, fine, whatever, that's fine. But if you're gonna race and you're gonna compete, take a little bit of care in calibrating your things, because it is a competition, and I know it's just Zwift, it doesn't matter. But you know what, dude? Like, have some respect for everyone else on the platform, and try to at least be fair and honest. But even that wasn't enough to provoke me to make this video. What provoked me to make this video was this person then goes around and tries to give people training tips and talks about how they've progressed as a cyclist when they have not, and their training philosophies, and they lecture everyone that watches their Twitch stream on improvement and how to do it and this and that. And the fact of the matter is, they are a fraud. And I do believe that they're doing a disservice to the people that don't know any better. And I can spot this, and I will show you guys the examples. And so hopefully you don't get that kind of situation where someone's giving you advice, and the advice turns out to be a bunch of crap that is coming from someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. So with that said, without further ado, let's get into it. All right, guys. So here we have the person that I suspect to be a bit invalid. They're Twitch streamers. You can see in the upper left. They are an A+ racer on Zwift with a 4.9 watts per kilo 20-minute power. And they claim to be about 145 pounds and able to push a massive amount of watts for 20 minutes relative to their weight. Now, I believe this to be a complete falsehood. First, let me specify, what does an A-plus rider on Zwift mean? An A-plus rider on Zwift, if we're talking outdoors on the road, depends on where you live, but generally speaking, in the United States, which is where this person lives, if you are an A-plus rider on Zwift, you should be racing probably outdoors Cat 2, maybe Cat 1, depending on your build, and definitely at the very least, if you have this power, you should be a Cat 3. And with a 4.9 watts per kilo 20-minute, you would be a competitive Cat 3 regardless of your build. Now, this person's build is short and skinny, which is what you'd expect from, say, a Cat 2 climber. But he might not, in a place that's pretty flat with sprints, he obviously is not a great sprinter. Although, 12 watts per kilo sprint isn't terrible. He might only be a Cat 3 in an area where they're sprinting. But regardless, we're talking about a fast Cat 3 racer or a medium Cat 2 racer. That's a very accomplished cyclist. And I want to stress again, we're talking about a very powerful cyclist here. These are not people this is not a person that would train for 4. You do not get power numbers like this training 4 hours a week. You just do not. It's not possible to do unless you're a genetic freak. And if you are a genetic freak, there will be some evidence of that, and we'll come to that. But suffice to say, this power profile that I've shown you, this is a power profile that would, if you translated it to outdoors, be someone who should be in races with domestic professional cyclists in Pro 1-2 racing. And at very least, this person should be a very competitive Cat 3 racer. Maybe they don't want to step up to Cat 2, fine, whatever. This person at very least would be able to throw down with Cat 3 racers anywhere in the United States with this power profile. So with that said, I just wanted to establish what the baselines here. Let's go into a little bit deeper and talk about it some more. Okay, here are some race results, recent race results from this individual. As you can see, they are finishing at the pointy end of A category racing, which is what you'd expect from someone who is a very powerful, very accomplished cyclist in competitive races. Finishing on the podium, in fact, in Tour for All Stage 3. And as we can see, these 20-minute power numbers are very, very good. This is, again, I just wanted to establish what we're talking about here. This is a person who is fast among the fast. This is not someone who is in a small pond dunking on Zwift racers, sandbagging down in Category B. No, this is a person who is racing Category A, A+, and dominating. So this is, again, these are the results that you would expect from a very powerful racer who is able to race, again, outdoors as a Pro 1-2-3, and in that ballpark. And I just wanted to post these results just to give you kind of a baseline of the performance that we are talking about for a racer like this. So let's look at an outdoor ride by our erstwhile cyclist. I had to go back, and I admit that I had to go back several months to find an outdoor ride because this person has not ridden or has not uploaded at least any outdoor rides to Strava since last summer. Which is, they live up north. That could happen. But what we see when we go to the most recent outdoor rides, and I will preface by saying, they haven't ridden outdoors in 6 months. You can do a lot of improvement on Zwift in 6 months. So that is the one thing that I suspect anyone who would defend what we're seeing here would say, is that, well, it's been 6 months. You can improve a lot in 6 months. You can. You can probably improve 20% in 6 months. That's a huge number of improvement with dedicated training. Fact of the matter is, one, this person hasn't done dedicated training. They have done a lot of Zwift riding and racing, but no, I mean, I don't see a huge training plan. They're not putting in tons of hours, and there's no systematic approach to their training. So doubling their FTP, no. That maybe a 10% increase, maybe 20%. Okay, I'll give you that. Even doubling what I think your FTP is, more than doubling, no, I'm sorry. So here we have an outdoor ride. It is a flat ride out and back. So you can't say, well, they were probably going into the wind the whole ride. Nope, this is flat ride out and back. So they had a tailwind as well. What we see here is someone who is going very slow. What I would expect from someone who has a 4.9 20-minute power is that for an hour-long ride, they should probably be averaging somewhere around 21 miles an hour. Out and back on a flat ride, maybe 22 if they're just doing zone 2. Because we're going to say zone 2, that this is sort of the ride that we're looking at, although the heart rate zones do not seem to indicate that. But nonetheless, which is evidence that we'll get into. But nonetheless, what we have here is a very slow ride. 17 mile an hour average for an hour on a flat road out and back. I would say that Strava's estimated watts is probably correct. I would say, and maybe it's a little underestimate even. I would say maybe 150 watts. Let's say 150 watts is what we're looking at here. We could even be generous and say 180 watts is what this person actually did on this ride. 17 miles an hour on a flat road out and back. I'm sorry, that is not a lot of power. That is not what I would expect from someone who can race with Cat 2s to do. And you would say, well, this is probably a recovery ride, dude. This could be he was just out noodling around. I disagree with that, and here's why. I know from looking at this person's Zwift power and what their claimed zones are, that the 183 beats per minute that you see here is high zone 3 for this person. And that an hour-long FTP effort for this person would be around 190-something beats. And I do believe, and I will say, I do believe that they are using a wrist-mounted heart rate monitor, like a watch or something, not a heart rate strap across the chest, which means that I think that the heart rate numbers are wildly high than what we're actually seeing. But I've seen this person on Zwift, on their stream, do an hour-long FTP sort of effort, and their average heart rate was around 190. So I will take that as their FTP heart rate at face value, even though I think it's probably reading a little high. And we will say that 183 beats per minute is high zone 3 for this person. And in a high zone 3 tempo effort for a person who has a 300 watt FTP and they weigh 145 pounds, should be going a bit faster than 17.4 miles an hour. This, what I'm seeing here is someone who's riding zone 3 at 150 watts or so, and they probably have a 175 watt FTP. That is what I would take away from this. Now, you might say, well, this is just one ride. I have looked through several rides that this person uploaded outdoors, and they all look similar to this. There is not one outdoor ride. This person has never posted an outdoor ride that I can see where they averaged 20 miles an hour. 20 miles an hour, which would be, and I will say for me, My FTP is around 315 to 320. 20 miles an hour for me is a zone 2 ride outdoors for an hour. Or heck, I mean, I can hold 20 miles an hour for 5 hours. I'm not bragging, but I'm just telling you that my FTP is similar to this person's, what they claim. And 20 miles an hour for me is zone 2. This person should be, in my opinion, if they are what they claim they are, they should have most of their outdoor rides should be at least 20 miles an hour. This person also weighs 15 pounds less than me. So they, in theory, especially on the hillier rides, they should be going significantly faster than what I would do. So just using my own performance as a metric, I would say that it's safe to say something weird, at very least something suspicious, is going on here. This person, again, has never uploaded a ride faster than 20 miles an hour. And I've looked for races. They claim to have done Cat 5 races where, again, they didn't even podium, which I think is strange for someone who is racing A+ on Zwift. Again, A+ on Zwift, again, equivalent of a Cat 2 or a Cat 3 outdoors or faster. You should almost be able to lap the field in a Cat 5 race if you're racing A+ on Zwift, especially if it's hilly. If it's hilly, you should be able to drop everyone on the first hill and just continue every hill putting time into them until you lap the field, period. So I don't think that it's possible that, based on what I've seen, and that this person is actually putting out the watts they say they are. So with that said, I think I could show you a ton more rides. They all look like this. They are all 45 minutes to an hour at 16, 17 miles an hour with high heart rates. Nothing here about the outdoor rides this person has ever done has led me to believe that their Zwift numbers are accurate. But I do want to make a couple other reference points, just so that I'm not showing you one screenshot and basing everything on that. So sit tight, and we'll dig a little deeper. Okay, what we have here is a segment that I found on this person where they did a climb. Not a huge climb, but a climb nonetheless. And this was a PR that they set on a segment, which leads me to believe that it is at least one of the faster. Maybe it's not full gas. It wasn't a full gas attempt. Maybe they just had a really strong tailwind, and they've never even tried to do full gas. But it's at least the fastest that they'd ever done this. So I think it's indicative to see where this person stacks up. Because in the last example, I showed like a typical outdoor ride, and I sort of used myself and what I would do what I would be able to do at the power that I know I can push on a similar ride outdoors. I want to compare this to other riders on the leaderboard and showing the power that they put out and the results that they got in order to get the times on the leaderboard, and then compare it to what our rider in question here is putting out and the results that he got, and sort of use that to be illustrative of the actual power that he is able to put out. So with that said, we can look at this. We see the KOM on this segment is 3 minutes and 16 seconds at 24 miles an hour by Mr. Chris Neig. And we can dig a bit deeper into the leaderboard, which will soon be paid only, and look at our rider in question, who is 58th on the leaderboard, and see if we can spot some discrepancies in their power data. So with that said, let's dig in a little bit deeper. Okay, here we have the full leaderboard. We see, again, Chris Neig sitting there in the lead with a blazing time of 3 minutes and 16 seconds. Thankfully, Mr. Neig was using a power meter, so we can see that his actual power was 313 watts. The next four guys are using estimated power. So we can't trust those numbers specifically. And then we come down to number 6, Mr. Schneider, using a power meter, 341. Compared to Mr. Neig, we don't know whether Neig perhaps weighs a bit less than Mr. Schneider, which is entirely possible. It could be that since it is a climb, that Chris Neig weighs 20 pounds less. And so 20 pounds less means you need less power to go faster. Alternatively, Chris Neig could have had a sick headwind, or a sick tailwind, I should say, that allowed him to go faster at a lower power. Or perhaps Mr. Schneider is actually weighs less than Chris Neig, but he had a headwind. We don't know. All we can say is that it seems like, depending on your weight, to get a time like this, roughly, and we can look at other people with power on the leaderboard, roughly speaking, weight does affect it. Roughly speaking, to get in the top 10 of this, you have to be doing at least 300 watts. If you have a sick tailwind or you're super light, maybe you can get on here at a bit under 300. But if you want to place in the top 10 of this particular segment, you should be doing 300 or so watts for 3 minutes. Now, our rider in question, we know for a fact from his Zwift profile that this would be 313 watts. That would be slightly above his FTP, not a few percent above. So he should be able to hold 313 watts easily for over 20 minutes, perhaps 30. So he should be able to crush this KOM. And I mean, crush it to such an extent that he should be able to take this KOM without a tailwind, especially since he's only 145 pounds. If you're 145 pounds and you are able to put out 330 watts for 15 minutes, which we'll say is about roughly his power, you should be able to take this KOM no problem. A 3-minute effort, he should be able to put out 400 watts. He should be able to put out 450 for 316. Taking this KOM should be literal child's play. But let's see what our rider in question actually did on his hardest ever attempt at this segment. Okay, so coming in down at 58th, we can see that our rider in question, whose name I've smudged out, they did 183 beats per minute. No power meter on the bike, of course. 183 beats per minute, again, would be very high zone 3. So it wasn't a full gas effort according to the heart rate. But again, I don't believe these heart rate numbers. I don't put too much credence into them because I do believe it's an optical wrist-mounted heart rate monitor, which I think is giving wildly inflated numbers. I don't think a 27-year-old should have I don't think a 27-year-old is likely to have a maximum heart rate over 200. I'm sure there are people out there that do. I think it's incredibly unlikely. But even let's take the heart rate numbers at face value, that his threshold heart rate is 190. This is very close to threshold. So what we're seeing here is relatively close to threshold. And so again, it's not a full gas. A 4-minute segment or a 3-minute segment for the KOM is a very fast VO2 max. Is a fast VO2 max effort. If you were going full gas. What we see here is more like a zone 3 effort. And what we're seeing is an estimated watts of 186. And we can say that's fairly reasonable because as we see down in 64, we have a gentleman using a power meter who came in 3 seconds slower and was doing 211 watts. Safe to assume that our 140-pound rider in question here at 58 is probably doing a little bit less than that to go a little bit faster because he's a featherweight. And so, 186 watts seems like a reasonable output for someone who's riding tempo. And in fact, I would say this doesn't account for tailwind, and I would assume that since this is a PR, that the person had a tailwind. My guess would be if you took the tailwind into account, that it's incredibly likely that this person was going well below 186. In fact, I would say, based on the anecdotal evidence that we've seen, such as the fact that this person averaged, I don't know, the power that I would expect. Again, this person had 183 beats per minute heart rate for an hour to ride 17 miles an hour on the flat. And that was roughly, in my book, I would be generous in saying 175 watts of power output. I think 175 watt power output here is probably appropriate for the effort that we're seeing here and their stated weight, if the weight is believable. The heart rate numbers, I don't know how to jive that, because obviously you can see that other people in the area around here are not putting out anything close to this heart rate. He's got a high heart rate according to everything. Again, I've talked about why I don't necessarily buy the heart rate number. But nonetheless, this is the same heart rate that he averaged on a Zone 2 ride, which was at 17 miles an hour. I'm assuming this is with a mega tailwind. Suffice it to say, this person is not, if this person does have a 300 watt FTP and they were riding at tempo, which is what their heart rate says that they were riding at, or high tempo, high Zone 3, they would be doing probably about 280 watts for this segment. So 280 watts in this segment probably wouldn't be enough to get him in the top 10, but it would be enough to get him in the top 20. And considering how light this fellow is, I would say that 280 watts would be damn close to a top 10. But instead, what we see here is someone who, by all evidence of outdoor riding that we can see, by all evidence, they are not a very fast rider. They are, again, Cat 5 pack fodder, which is incidentally what their results, their outdoor racing results would show, is Cat 5 pack fodder. Cat 5 pack fodder, slow outdoor rides, and an all-star on Zwift. I think altogether, when we look at the sum total that I've presented here, I think it's safe to say that this person is, their Zwift results are a bit outside the realm of believable for what they've demonstrated outdoors. And with that said, I think I've given you kind of a good idea of how to look at a Zwift racer who you suspect might not be completely legitimate with the numbers that they're putting out, and how important it is for people to, if this is indeed just an accident, to calibrate their equipment properly, because honestly, this person is doing themselves a disservice. If they believe that they're pushing out 300 watts and they're eating based on doing 300 watts, they're going to be wildly overeating. They're going to say, "Oh, I burned 1,500 calories on that ride," when they only burned 800. Well, guess what happens if you eat double the calories that you're supposed to eat? You're going to gain a little weight. And if your training zones are all messed up, you're not going to be getting good training. It's important that you have your numbers calculated correctly for your own sake. Sure, you might be a sociopath who likes to cheat on Zwift, but really, even in the long run, you're still only cheating yourself because your numbers aren't set properly, your training is screwed up, your diet is screwed up, and in the end, it's really damaging to you individually, regardless of what you do to other people on Zwift. So, the last thing I want to talk about is that this person does have a wheel-on trainer. And I know for a fact from watching said person calibrate it that they can set the power to whatever they want it to be. If they want it to read high, they can turn a knob and make it read high. If they want to make it read lower, they can turn a knob and make it read lower. And from watching this person calibrate their trainer, what I have seen is that they go, I am turning the knob. Okay, now it feels about right. And it just turns out that feels about right makes you an A+ racer on Zwift. Personally, I think someone who is Cat 5 pack fodder and who by all evidence doesn't even have a 200 watt FTP, as far as anything I can tell, should probably keep turning that knob. And again, should keep their training advice to themselves and not put themselves up on a pedestal on their Twitch channel and lecture people about training and motivation and goals and all of that. When achieving your goals is as simple as turning a knob a little bit further to the right and beating your old numbers, I think that you should have a little bit of introspection about that. So anyway, I hope this video was helpful and it wasn't just me ranting about, well, I know it was just me ranting about nonsense, but I hope that at least being able to look at some of this data will help you. If you have friends that you know in real life aren't that special, but on Zwift they're all-stars, that you can sort of look at their rides and their outdoor data and other sources and kind of get an idea of what's going on. And again, it'll help you be a bit more discerning. So if you have any comments, I know this video was way too long, but if you do have any comments besides telling me that this video is way too long, leave them below. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.